Very warm welcome once again to all of you. Today's meeting is based on this philosophy is that when we have to win big in our life, so we have to start thinking big. Now, with this philosophy, so India has stood itself and has taken a big lead in last 4 to 5 years. And today we have a third largest ecosystem in the world. Now, with the present government, And with the present government, the entrepreneurial mindset of the people and the professionals, now we have come up with a lot good startups in last few years, and now India has produced good unicorns in the areas of fintech, in the areas of edtech, in the areas of e-commerce, etc., etc., etc. Now the Indian government has built a strong ecosystem for nursing innovations and startups in the country that will drive employment to the normal people as well as professionals. Now, now the theme of today's meeting is the startup, the case studies in the startup, and what we as professionals, we as chartered accountants, what opportunities are there in the field of startups, uh, and the practical case studies. To explain in detail, today we have a very dynamic and a young chartered accountant here, Jitendra Nagpal, who has loads of experience in the field of startups. So, sir, we welcome you, Jitendra, sir. And I would like to special thank Jitendra, sir, that he is in his native place right now and he has joined all the way from his native place to share his knowledge, to share his experience, to share his learning. So, thank you very much, Jitendra, sir, for joining today and investing your time and sharing your knowledge to our study circle. Now, before going to your deliberation, sir, I have certain few announcements. Now, first announcement is regarding the next meeting, and that meeting is on 13th of June, that is Sunday, morning 10:30 to 12:30. The meeting is on New Code of Ethics 2020, and so members are requested to join in large numbers. The details of the meeting will be posted in the chat box in some few time. And also the members are requested that if they have any query, so kindly post the queries in the chat box for Jitendra sir. And and the third thing is that the members are requested not to post their membership numbers in the chat box. So it creates inconvenience for the speakers and for the members at large. So with this, now I request CA Utkarsh Sharma to kindly introduce today's learned speaker, CA Jitendra Nagpal ji. Over to you, Utkarsh.
Thank you, Deepak ji. CA Jitendra Nagpal ji is an astute finance professional having extensive experience of working across different startups as a part of leadership team. He also acts as an advisor to many budding and established entrepreneurs on solving the complex business problems. Mr. Nagpal is a qualified chartered accountant and company secretary holding an AIR 20 in CS professional. He worked with PharmEasy, currently valued at US $1.5 billion and been part of its 10x growth in a short span of around 2 years. He was instrumental in fundraising, strategic planning, corporate finance, and establishing treasury, business finance, and other important functions. Before PharmEasy, he worked at Nolarity, a software as a service company backed by Sequoia as finance controller. Before starting his stint in the startup space, he worked with financial giants such as Macquarie, IDFC, and ICICI Bank in various roles across functions. He's an avid reader and loves to guide budding entrepreneurs in establishing and growing their venture. He has also advised many established entrepreneurs to solve their complex business problems. With this, I welcome him. Over to you, sir.
Thanks, Utkarsh. Thanks, Deepak. So, I would like to welcome everyone and thanks for joining us today in the session. I would request everyone to feel free to ask any question that you may have so that we can have an interactive and knowledge sharing session where I can also learn from you guys and I can share my knowledge with you guys. So today we will talk about startups, especially in Indian context. Definition of startup is a bit fluid so far, but in common parlance, when we are talking about startups, we are normally referring to tech first startups where technology is the enabler or they are building everything based on the technology. they are building the entire business or supply chain or everything on tech, so that they can serve larger number of customers, larger number of users. So these type of startups are impacting us in many ways. They are changing the ways of our life, as well as we will see in next slides. They are impacting us directly and indirectly in both ways. So directly, we know like Paytm, Ola, Uber, they have impacted us. Now we can't even think of life without these type of startups. Whenever we are using their service, we get reminded that yes, there are these companies who started small and have become so big in a short span of time. And there are a lot of startups who are impacting us indirectly, which we may or may not know. For example, there is a company called Tosh, which is a video metadata platform, which captures what YouTube videos we watch. They tag them and shows us advertisement based on whatever videos we are watching. So you might have noticed, if you are watching video related to something, you start seeing ads related to those type of products on your phone, maybe on Facebook, on Google. Whenever you are searching anything, you get more and more ads. So they are changing user experience in an indirect way. So with this, I'll start with, and I have before we move on, I have few questions for you guys, and I would like you to answer these questions in chat box. So here is the first question. Which company runs the most taxi rides in the world? Please answer in chat box. Yeah. Yes, Meenu? Absolutely, Kaushal. Yes, Deepak, Suresh. Yes. Yeah, it's Uber. That's right. Okay. Next question. Which company have the highest room inventory in the world? In India, I know it's Oyo, but have you guys any idea? Yes. Yes, Gaurav. Airbnb. Yes, that's right. Karan. Yes. Yes, Anand. Airbnb. Correct. Moving on to the next question. Which is the largest source of information for us today? Yes, it's Google or Wikipedia, depending on what you see as source of information. Okay, so one more question. Which platform have the most content in the world? Platform with the most content. YouTube in terms of video, yes. But in terms of images, it can be Instagram, it can be Facebook. Have you guys noticed any pattern here? There is a pattern emerging in all these. So there is one thing common in all these four companies. Yeah, US based companies. Technology, correct. So, okay, let me flip this questions a bit. How many taxis? So Uber runs most taxi rides, right? How many taxis does Uber own? Exactly, Mr. Kothari. They don't have ownership of asset. None of them have any ownership of asset. Uber don't own any taxi. Airbnb don't own any room. Google doesn't create any content, or Wikipedia don't publish any article on their own, and they are asset light, right, Gaurav? They are asset light. And one more thing, they are easily replicable across geographies. So whenever they want to grow their business, they don't need to build any warehouse. They don't need to build any building. They don't need to build any hub. They can replicate it very easily because they are tech based. They are changing our habits and our spending patterns. And when I say spending pattern, not in terms of only spending money, but the way we are spending our times. Do you remember how much time we were using on YouTube like 10 years ago? How much time we were using? How much time we were spending on internet? Today, on an average, a Zomato user or Swiggy user on an average spends 15 to 20 minutes every day on the app. It's different whether they order or not, but still they spend. A lot of users spend their time on Flipkart and Amazon. So Flipkart and Amazon have become a new norm for window shopping. They are creating disruptions. They are creating disruption in most of the aspects of our life. The way we see things, the way we do things, all have been disrupted. Let's take a few examples here. In taxi service, right? Earlier, taxi means taking a cab, yellow and black cab, just you have to wave your hand. And if it is metered, then that's fine. If it's not metered, you have to negotiate for the fare, how much you will pay, and at times they'll deny, right? But today, when we are talking about taxi service, what we are thinking, it's Uber or Ola. They have become synonyms of taxi. We don't say book a taxi, we say book an Ola, book an Uber. So they have changed the way we think, changed the way we commute. So they have impacted our life significantly. So since they have impacted our life significantly, let's see how much value they have created for themselves. Sure, they have created value for us. We have more convenient mode of transport. We have more convenient mode of commuting. We have cheaper way of commuting. But how much value they have created for themselves? Let's take an example here. I have a question here, right? So what was the valuation of Ola in 2019? I am removing 2020 and 2021 because these are abnormal years. But please try and answer this question. What was the valuation of Ola in 2019? Yeah, 6 billion, 5 billion. Anyone else? Okay, before, since we don't have any more answers, yeah, 6 billion. Okay, so the consensus here is 6 billion. Before I give you the answer whether it's right or wrong, let's see some perspective on valuation. There are total 5,000 plus companies listed on BSE and NSEs. Market capitalization of 95% of the companies is less than 1 billion US dollar. And when we are talking about 6 billion or greater, there are around 70 companies only whose market cap is greater than 6 billion or greater. So that represents only 1.4% of the overall companies. So around 99% of the companies don't reach that mark, 6 billion. So now in light of this, anyone wants to change the answer or it remains same? Okay, Deepak, same. Anyone else? Same. Okay. Okay. Yeah, so that's right. Ola have created immense value for them, and they are competing with around top 1% companies listed on BSE plus NSE combined. So their valuation was 6 billion. Now their valuation have gone down a bit because of pandemic and everything. But in 2019, their valuation was $6 billion. Now let's see groceries, right? When we were thinking about groceries earlier, it was a task in itself. You have to walk to the store, you have to pick items in cart, you have to carry that cart, you have to wait on the billing counter, and then you are getting something. Today, when we are talking about grocery, We just think simply Grofers, Big Basket. Sure, there are Amazon, Flipkart, and other lot of companies who are helping. DMart have also come in online grocery deliveries. But the point here is they have changed the way we live. They changed the way we spend our time. They have changed the way we spend our money. One more example here, in books, right? When we were thinking about books, this was the image which was coming to our mind. Today, whenever we are thinking about book, we simply read it on a tablet or a Kindle, or yeah, right, or we read it on mobile, or we read it on our laptop, right? So they have changed the way we read. And in fact, now you have plethora of choices when you are carrying books in soft copy. Whenever you are carrying in hard copy, there was limitations of carrying number of books. Now there is no such limitation. As far as you have connection to internet, you can read as many books as you want, as many types of books as you want. Now, another example is disruption in hotel services. When we were thinking, it was like Taj, Oberoi, or any non-standard hotel. Whenever you were thinking of standard hotels, it was Taj. Today, in India, especially, it's Oyo. Whenever we want a hotel which is competitively priced and standardized in services, provide a decent quality, we think of Oyo. In shopping, right? Earlier, shopping for us was creating a list, then going to market, then carrying all of these bags, and making sure that you don't lose count of number of bags you are carrying, and carrying these back to home. All these type of hassles were there. Today, whenever we are thinking about shopping, right, it's not limited to any special occasion, or it's not limited to we going to any mall or market. We simply open Flipkart or Amazon on our mobile, and we start ordering whatever we like, and number of choices, the price, everything is in our favor. It's just that you are spoiled with choices. Whatever you want, almost everything is available on Amazon and Flipkart. On this note, as we talked about valuation of Ola, let us take a look at how Big Bazaar fares at compared to Flipkart. Flipkart was started in 2008 as a book selling platform. They hold no stores, and it was acquired by Walmart in 2018. Walmart acquired 77% stake of Flipkart for $16 billion, which assigns it a valuation of $21 billion USD. So Flipkart was valued at $21 billion USD in 2018. Now, on the other hand, Big Bazaar is one of the oldest and largest hypermarket chain of the country. It has 250 plus stores in over 120 cities across the nation. It was recently acquired by Reliance Retail. Can you guess at what valuation it was acquired? Maybe some of you would know at what valuation it was acquired. But the point here is, I want to highlight the contrast in valuation. Flipkart was valued at $21 billion. Can you guess how much Big Bazaar was valued when it was acquired by Reliance Retail? Please answer in chat box. If you know, you can answer right. If you know, please take a guess. Gaurav says $3 billion. Sunil says 16,000 crore. Suresh is saying 5 billion. Mr. Kothari saying 25,000 crore. Radhesham sir saying 15 billion. So here is contrasting valuation. Flipkart was acquired at $21 billion valuation. Big Bazaar was acquired at $3.36 billion valuation. So this shows how much value they are creating despite of being asset light. We have a habit of seeing, if you see our course, right, the way we value our businesses, all these businesses are valued. How we had one method said net asset value, how much value they are having, or DCF, how much cash they are generating. All these methodologies doesn't apply to all these things because their profitability is a bit far away. They are burning cash, they are not generating cash. Still, they are changing our habits, they are changing the way we live, they are changing the way we think about things. So that's why they are assigned these many valuations. I'll give you an example here. Earlier, most of us who are staying in metro cities were uncomfortable paying delivery charges to Zomato and Swiggy. But today we are okay paying 10 rupees, 20 rupees delivery charges. This is how they have changed our pattern, our thinking, our habits. So slowly, they'll start churning money. They'll start monetizing users more and more. And once it becomes a habit where we can't change it, or it becomes very difficult for us to change the habit, we'll rather pay to these startups rather than changing our habits. This is the reason they are acquired this much valuation. Now in eating places, I know we are missing all these eateries, but today when we are thinking about eating out, it's Zomato or Swiggy. Now, one more thing I would like to highlight here, there are a lot of things which are different behind the scenes. We often perceive Swiggy and Zomato to be companies of similar nature. We see them as a food delivery platform. From surface, that may be right. But if you see closely, that is not the case. Zomato is all about restaurants. It started as a platform providing menu of various restaurants and then started offering restaurants table reservations. Then it started programs like Zomato Gold, and then they changed it to Zomato Pro. So they are all about restaurants. On the other hand, Swiggy is all about delivery. Yeah, it focuses on food delivery primarily though. But if you look at the expansion plans like starting of Swiggy Go, right, and they started Swiggy Genie in lockdown. So Zomato is all about restaurants. Swiggy is all about deliveries. So whenever you are looking at a startup, or maybe you are comparing two startups, you may think that they are same in the nature and they are competing with each other. Sure, they might be competing with each other, but their strategy, their thinking about business, the way they are approaching, the way they are thinking about monetizing consumers is totally different. Totally different. Now, let's see how they have brought disruption in media. Now, media earlier meant newspapers or some journals. Today, when we are referring to media, we are commonly referring to social media. Earlier, we used to get most of the news and information from our news channels and newspapers. Today, we get most of our information from social media platforms like WhatsApp, Facebook. Maybe we read Google News, and there are other apps like Insta News. And that's the reason idioms like WhatsApp University makes a run on social media at times. And you know how much value WhatsApp have created for themselves, and they were acquired in 2014 by Facebook on a massive valuation of $19 billion. And there is an endless list, right? They are impacting us in every aspect of our life. For example, Paytm, we use it in our day-to-day lives. Paytm started as a mobile recharge platform. It became vastly popular during demonetization. And now with backing from marquee investors, it is trying to become everything it can. They're into e-commerce, insurance, stockbroking, online gaming, payment gateway, and whatnot. And if you joined early, there was a discussion around vaccination, and a lot of us are struggling to get a slot on CoWIN. So Paytm have integrated with CoWIN also, and they help you get a slot. They pop up a message that slot is available in so and so pin code if you register for that. So they are trying to do everything they can. Another example here in fintech is PhonePe. PhonePe is owned by Flipkart. It was once a less popular rival of Paytm, but it competes neck to neck with Paytm now. In its initial days, Flipkart thought it to be a feature for them, but now it is amongst one of the most valued subsidiaries of it. Other subsidiaries like Myntra, eCart are not as much as valuable to Flipkart as PhonePe. And Walmart, whenever they are looking at monetizing their investment in Flipkart, PhonePe is one key part of their strategy always. So when it was last valued, it was valued at $5.5 billion. One more example here in fintech is Zerodha. Zerodha is completely bootstrapped. Whenever we are talking about startups, as you have noticed that I am talking about valuation, and this valuation is ascribed by VCs and PEs, but Zerodha is completely bootstrapped. Sure, they at one point in time they were struggling to get funds. They were rejected by a lot of a lot of VCs, a lot of private equity players for funding, because nobody thought a discount broker would work in India. Then they completely bootstrapped, and their latest estimated valuation, on which they bought back their ESOPs from their employees, was $1 billion. Now it has the highest market share, and now investors are chasing them. But Zerodha is completely up, and Zerodha have sufficient cash in their war chest now, and they are growing on their own, and they are not taking on any investor money as of now. Now, before I go to the last example in the fintech domain, just want to answer you guys one question here. Earlier, whenever we were thinking of insurance, say 5 or 6 years back, what was coming to our mind? Whenever we were thinking of buying an insurance, what was the first thing that came to our mind? LIC, correct? Yes. Yes, Vandana, LIC, Suresh ji, LIC, Aditya Singh, LIC. Now, fast forward to today, whenever we are thinking about buying an insurance, what comes to our mind? Policybazaar. Correct. Correct, Pankaj. New India. Okay. Policybazaar, Vandana. Yeah. Yes, Kothari ji. Policybazaar. Right. So now we don't think about an LIC agent. We think about Policybazaar. And that's why they are valued at $2.4 billion, and they are heading for an IPO soon. Now, moving on, we have a lot of other examples in EdTech. Byju's. I'm sure all of you have heard about Byju's. Any idea how much is Byju's worth? What was the Byju's latest valuation? 15 billion. Yes, Gaurav, 15 billion. So there are other players in EdTech domain also. For example, QMath. So Byju's is focused on lot of classes, lot of subjects. They have so now recently they have acquired Disney's platform. So now it's Disney Byju for younger kids. For young adults, for school students, they have all other classes. For UPSC aspirants, they have their courses. Whereas QMath is completely focused on solving math problems. There is another company called Unacademy. Unacademy focuses mainly on UPSC preparation, IIT preparation. They are for people who are targeting competitive exams. One more example here is Whitehead Junior, which was recently acquired by Byju's at $300 million. Before 18 months before acquisition, they were valued merely at $6 million. But the way they grow, the way they have advertised, the way they have positioned themselves, the way they have put forth their value proposition for parents and kids, they have gained immense valuation. They reached $300 million valuation in less than 18 months. And list is endless, right? In health tech, there is PharmEasy, 1mg, NetMeds, MedLife. MedLife was acquired by PharmEasy recently. NetMeds was acquired by Reliance Retail. And there are many more, like Udaan, which is a B2B player, Meesho, which is into social commerce, Rentomojo, where we can rent furniture, then Cars24, where you can sell and buy second-hand cars. The point here is they can be in any field, any space. They grow fast, create demand for the product, capture market, and compete with established brands in a different way though. For example, Ola and Uber, they have created demands. People who are using their own car, they were using other means of public transport like metro or local. Now they prefer Ola and Uber. So the Ola and Uber created demand. When I say created, that means that demand was not existing when they came in. But today they have created the demand and they have created that. They have captured that market. Another example, lot of beauty products from Wow. There is one company called Wow Skin Sciences. They compete with HUL and ITC products. There is another startup called Let's Shave that competes directly with Gillette India. Udaan is a close rival of IndiaMart, but it facilitates transactions as well, whereas IndiaMart only provides listings. Now, since now we have talked about a lot of startups, I would like to touch base upon a few of the things that helps making a startup successful, and they are essential. The reason I'll be putting forth there is because after that, we'll be talking about opportunities for professionals and startup. Now, to capture those opportunities, we need to understand what are the key components of a startup, what makes a startup a growth engine, how they'll grow, and knowing all their key area, we can customize our service offerings. Now, first and foremost key component of a startup is an idea. We need to have an idea which we can put into execution, and then we can create a company or create a business entity and start working on that. Another component is market. We'll talk about all these components a bit in detail in following slides. Then another key component is product. When I say product, what service or goods they are offering to the general public. What is their business model? How will they generate revenue is another key component. And in my opinion, the most important key component is execution, because without execution, all these components are of no value. Now let's talk about all these components a bit in detail. Now, the idea is what type of problem you are trying to solve for. It can be, there are examples of ideas. It can be one-stop solution for anything. For example, one-stop solution for buying goods, one-stop solution for your financial service needs, or maybe to solve the problem of transport, to solve the problem of unstandardized hotel rooms. to ensure, for example, to ensure good healthcare or affordable healthcare for everyone, or to make life easy by doing anything, or maybe buying, introducing a new product, introducing a new service where your life gets easier and you have more time to spare, or you can do things much more faster or much more quickly. So in the idea stage, you need to find a problem which you are trying to solve. You need to define that problem succinctly, because today's world is so intertwined that if you don't define your problem which you are trying to solve, or you don't define the problem you are trying to solve, then you might lose out on it. Their boundaries can get blurred, and then you have a lot of things on your plate which you can't focus on. So rather than solving 100 of different problems or having 100 of different features, you can focus on one problem. Once you have cracked that, you can go ahead and uh, once you have cracked that problem, you can go ahead and start solving other related problems. And then your solution, how will you solve that problem? For example, let's take example of Ola and Uber. How do you solve problem for unstandardized commute or expensive commute or not getting cabs? They have aggregated a lot of cabs. Now, earlier when you were standing on the road, you could book cab only which you can see. Today you can see cabs whatever available in 2, 3, 4, even 5 kilometers of vicinity. And for driver, they also have solved the problem. They don't have to wait for a commuter at any place, or they don't need to run empty. They can directly go to the pickup place and pick the commuter. So this is the idea stage. And then there is market. You have to identify what market you'll be targeting. What is your target addressable market? Your target addressable market can combine two components. One is the existing market, which is already there. Second, you can create new market. As I have talked about Ola and Uber, they have created a new market and they have captured that. So target addressable market comprises of two things: existing market and creation of new market. You also have to be cognizant of the fact that what competition is there. There can be an existing competition. There can be a potential competition which might emerge, because this is simple rule of economics. Wherever there are super profits, competition will emerge. New players will come in market. New players will start delivering the same solution or similar solution. And there can be cross-sectional competition also. As we read in our earlier economic classes, that tea is a close substitute of coffee, and so there can be cross-sectional competition also, which you need to be aware of. And we need to see, whenever we are working on an idea, we are targeting a market, what is our competitive advantage? How will we be able to capture the market? How will we be able to beat the competition? There can be many competitive advantage. One, we might have low cost or better value for money products. We might have a better product which is not available in market as of now. It can be much more convenient than whatever goods and services are available in market. Or it can be path breaking idea, which very few people have thought about, or people haven't even thought about it, but you are providing that. Next component is the product. Now, what product you are providing? When I say product, it comprises services and goods, both. What are the use cases of your product? How your product will help customers? How your product will make their life easy? How it will add value to their life? So you have to think about all these use cases when you are defining the problem statement and solving for it. Then you have to think about product features. What all features they have in their product. What design they have of their product, how they are designing it, how they are positioning it, right? What is their brand identity? For example, Oyo. have positioned themselves as a hotel company, standard hotel company. Ola have positioned them as a logistics company. Whenever Ola and Uber are talking, they are not saying that they are a cab aggregator. They are positioning always them as a logistics company where you can deliver goods, where you can send goods or parcels, and of course, taxi service is one thing there. Next is business model. Now, business model is very important from monetization perspective or from overall financial perspective, right? What is your monetization strategy? At one point in time, everyone was thinking of acquiring users. They were just acquiring users and there were no thoughts of monetizing it, because in US there are examples where companies have acquired users and then they have monetized it. Today, it have become much more important in India also. How do you monetize them? It's not only about acquiring users. Unless you monetize them, there is no value, because you burn so much money in acquiring a user. If you don't get that money back, then you will not be able to make any profits in your business ever. What is your distribution strategy? How do you distribute your product or services? That is also very much important. What are your financials? What is your unit economics? How much money you make on every order or every customer you serve? What is your average order value? You need to think of all these aspects whenever you are thinking about a startup. And what are your margins? What are your gross margins? What are your contribution margins in current state? And down the line few years, how much money you'll be making on each and every order? And the most important aspect, as I was saying, execution. In execution, most important aspect, people. You have to have people whom you can rely upon, because there is a famous saying by Stephen King: talent is cheaper than table salt. Lot of people have same idea at one point in time. What really differentiate is the execution. Right? Our mind is for generating ideas, not holding them. We need to identify key people. It becomes immensely important whom you are hiring, who are your co-founders, whom you are working with. And then you need to define your milestones. Your milestones can be anything. Your milestones can be launching an app, adding 100 users, adding 1,000 users, adding couple of more features. You have to define those milestones. You have to put timelines against those milestones. And then you have to decide what are your next steps. You have to time box them. If you don't time box them, then it will become very difficult for you to execute. I'll take a pause for a minute. Just give me a minute.
Hello. Hello. Okay, sir, your
Since we have covered key components of startup and how they are changing the way of life for us, it's time we talk about some of the success stories and see how the life is not so rosy as it always seems. This is nowadays popularly known as the Instagram effect, where you will feel other people's life is full of good things only. But as we all know, that is not true, as life always have its share of good things and not so good things. Whenever we are seeing news about startups. What we are seeing that X startup have raised so much of funding, X startup is valued at so billion dollars. But what we don't see that behind that, there are a lot of struggles they go through. There are a lot of things they need to course correct. And there are a lot of failure stories because we never hear about all these failure stories. This is known as survivorship bias, wherein we see only success stories, where we don't see failure stories because nobody talks about them, because that doesn't give us any adrenaline rush. One startup which is very, very popular is Dream11. Any ideas? How old is Dream11? Please answer in chat box. How old is Dream11? Gaurav is saying 13 years. Sunil sir is saying 2 years. Praveen is saying 15 years. So Dream11, yes, Karan, right. It was founded in 2008 by two co-founders named Harsh and Bhavit. One interesting thing, this app is not available on Play Store. India is known as Android capital of the world. But getting 5 crore users without being on Play Store is no mean feat. As we all know, Dream11 is title sponsor of IPL. Now let's see what ups and downs they have gone through. Initially, they were seen as gambling platform. They beaten all the odds and a $5 billion company today. Now, when we are saying gambling platform, we don't have a very good feeling about that company. We always think gambling as a negative aspect. Now, let's see how did they get this success. First, they understood and encased user behavior. If you have noticed, I was talking a lot about monetization, because that's the key thing which every startup aspire to. That is holy grail for any startup. They understood and encased user behavior. How they did this? As a human being, we have an urge to show our knowledge to everyone. How Dream11 fulfills that? You can select a team and show your knowledge that you are a much better selector than other people. Now there is a urge to compete. Now you compete with large pool of users here. And of course, there is an urge to win. There is an urge to earn some extra money. And then there is an urge to get highlighted, urge to get recognition. Of course, it doesn't happen in today's world where everything is happening virtually and there is no presence of people in the stadiums. But in earlier versions of IPL, whomsoever was winning Dream11 competition, they got a chance to show up in IPL match. There was a separate component of a few minutes where they were interviewing the Dream11 winner. So that way, you always get that adrenaline rush that, hey, if I win on Dream11, I can show my knowledge to other people. I can compete. I can win. I can earn extra income, and I might feature on TV. So they made their customers their hoarding, who advertises for them. And they also had their own share of problems. Initially, Dream11 was focusing on the entire season. And in today's world where attention span is so short, people were finding it very difficult to wait for entire season to see the result. They were not ready to wait. So Dream11 realized this as a problem. They course corrected and they started announcing results at the end of every match. So today, what we see in Dream 11 that you can compete on every match. You don't have to wait for entire tournament to get over to see the results, who the winner is. They adopted this one game strategy. Earlier, their revenue model was in-app advertisement. They were completely focused on in-app advertisement for revenue, which was not generating good results for them. And for users also, it was becoming a bit annoying. Whenever you are seeing an ad on app, you tend to lose your interest. You get distracted. And they also realized, because they were also not getting any ad revenue, they were not getting any major revenue from ads. So they moved to a freemium model. What happens in a freemium model? They provide you both features in a single app. You can use it for free also, and you can become a paid user also. So if you want to pay, you get a lot of additional features. But if you don't want to pay, you can use basic features as much as you want. So they moved to freemium model, and 85% users were still paying for free, but 15% were paying, and these 15% were making up for the entire prize money, as free user had little or no prize. So Dream 11 was keeping a portion of it. So whatever money these 15% users were paying, Dream 11 was keeping a portion of it and distributing rest to the winners. Now, one point here, if you are in those 15%, once you have paid for it, you become invested. Now you will act as a promoter for the app. You start talking about it. You start talking about it to people. You start promoting it, whether good things or bad things. If you win, you'll definitely talk good things. You'll post your winning to your friends, families, your acquaintances. But if you lose, you might talk about bad things, but you will definitely talk about it. And that way, the people who are not aware of Dream 11, they also become aware of it. So that creates a network effect where people make other people's aware, and this network continues. And one more thing here, it have not been an easy ride for the founders. They were rejected by around 150 investors, and then they got investors. So it was a very difficult time for them. Today we see it as a success story, but there have been a lot of things which these guys have gone through. And they defeated their biggest negative factor, tag of gambling, by bringing MS Dhoni, who himself carries a very positive image. And sure, there was a court decision which helped them and given them a legal status by deciding it as a game of skill. High Court decided that Dream 11 is a game of skill and not a game of chance. That makes it legitimate. Sure, there are a few states in India which doesn't recognize Dream 11 as a legitimate app, and if you are residents of any of those states, you cannot use Dream 11. But these type of things will always be there. It is by design in the nature, right? Once you start helping yourself, other things start automatically falling in place. And one more important thing which Dream 11 did, that they made their business as a referral business. As I said, network effect. The customer brings more customer. They haven't issued a lot of coupons or a lot of discounts or a lot of other prizes for free unless you are paying for it. But they issued coupon worth 100 rupees to the new user. If you are a new user, you'll get 100 rupees worth of coupon, and this coupon can be used to play 3 or 4 games. You can comfortably use this coupon and play 3 or 4 games on Dream 11. Now you have played these 3 or 4 games, you get addicted, and then again you start talking about it, good things, bad things, and if you have won, it will definitely push other people to the platform. They'll join the platform. Again, they get the 100 rupees. They play 3-4 games. They get addicted. And this is how they have created a massive user base without being on Android platform. So this is a brief story of Dream 11, how their ride have been, what they have done right, what problems they have faced. Now we'll talk about another popular startup, Cred. I'm sure all of us know. Now, in contrast with Dream 11, have any idea when Cred was formed? Please answer in chat box. Radhesham sir is saying 6 years, 4 years. Aditya is saying 2018. Amin sir is saying 2018. Hiren sir is saying 3 years. Yes. So that is right. It's 3 years old company. It was founded in 2018. Whenever there is a discussion about startup or valuation specifically, Cred is one company which is always talked about. Always talked about. The reason is the massive valuation they have got in such a short span of time. It was founded by Kunal Shah in 2018. Kunal Shah earlier founded a company called Freecharge. You might be aware of Freecharge, which was acquired by Axis Bank. Now, since he is a founder who have given a successful exit to its investors, most of investors who were with him in Freecharge journey have decided to back him in Cred. And since they know the pedigree of the founder, they know what Kunal Shah is capable of, they decided to back it with a massive valuation. Today, we know Cred have minuscule revenue. We know Cred have massive losses, but still it have huge valuation. So it is difficult to comprehend in most cases that how can a company which have no concrete business model, right? Like Cred have no concrete business model as of now. There is no clear evidence that how they will monetize their users. How a company with so much of minuscule revenue can be so highly valued. If you know, it had losses of INR 360 crore in FY 2020. To see why it is valued so much, we need to look into two things. One, the pedigree of the founder, which I just mentioned, and two, investors' thought process while investing. Now, Kunal Shah is one of the very few founders who delivered a successful exit to the investors. No, not that unlike listed companies investment where you can easily buy and sell your investment and you can make money if it is in profit or your share price have increased. In startup world, investors make money only when they get an exit. Now this exit can be a sell to another company. For example, Flipkart was sold to Walmart. Or if you get an IPO like Make My Trip. So unless you get that liquidity, you don't make any money. Definitely your value gets increasing, but that's only on books. And it is very difficult to realize that because there is no active liquid market for these securities there. Kunal's earlier company Freecharge was acquired by Axis Bank, and this is how he delivered the exit. Due to his stature and exit he delivered, he started trade with so high valuation in the first round itself. His earlier investors showed faith in him. Now to see why it was valued at $2.2 billion by the investors, one of its largest investors, Tiger Global. Tiger Global doesn't bet on companies. Today, if we are thinking about investing in a company, we see its financials, we see its business model, how much cash it will generate, how much profit it will generate, what is the user base, how much customers it will have, what will be its growth rate. They don't bet on these companies, on these factors or companies for that matter. In some cases where there is no revenue, there is no business model, one might bet on the founders that they are so passionate about their business, or their idea is so nice, or they have so much execution capabilities. Tiger Global doesn't bet on founders either. It doesn't even bet on markets. Tiger Global bets on trends or mega trends that it knows for sure will come to fruition in some future version of the world. This this investors portfolio comprises an academy, Byju's, Dream11, Grow, Upstocks, ShareChat, and Flipkart was one of its most successful investment. The main point here is they don't value companies on what they are now. They invest on what it can be. If it succeeds, how big it can be. On the downside, what they can lose. This is the way they think. If upside is unlimited, you have to see the downside also. For them, downside is 100% of their investment, but upside is virtually unlimited. There is no restriction on upside. It can be 50x, 100x, or any other multiplier. In case of cred, they have a filtered user base of people with high credit score. A safe assumption that can be made here that they will have higher than average discretionary spending power, and their user base can be monetized to generate revenue, because these are top 1% people of India in terms of financial stability, in terms of earning power, in terms of spending power, and it's a golden base of user. They are dream users for any company, and if you get a way to monetize it, there is sky is the limit. You can generate so much of revenue. You can manage their portfolio, you can issue them a credit card, you can have their liquidity, you can provide them plethora of services, because credit is also analyzing user behavior, how much credit card spending you are making, on what areas you are spending. They can probably provide a concierge service where you can ask credit to book hotel or restaurant table or flight ticket, because they know their preference. They'll definitely provide you intuitive solutions where you just need to answer yes or no. You don't need to go through all the hassle to book all these things. Now, in actual sense, or how they plan to actually monetize its user base and how successful it will be in this, that only time can tell us. But the point being, it is currently valued so massively without a concrete business model, that all is because of its user and monetization potential. Now, we have talked about success stories so far. We have talked about all the successful startups. We have talked about how they are getting massive valuations, how they are gaining momentum. Let's take one more example, which is not so hot. ShopClues. How many of you guys have heard about ShopClues? Anyone? Please answer in chat box if you guys ever heard about ShopClues. Gaurav, Viren, Kaushal. Yes. ShopClues is a classic case of rags to riches to rags. Yes, Vishal, Ajit, yes. So a lot of people have heard about ShopClues. ShopClues was founded in 2011, before Amazon came to India. It was once valued around a decade ago. It was valued at $1.1 billion. But in 2019, it was sold for a valuation of less than $100 million. For how much exact valuation it was sold is not available in public domain, but from an estimate, it is said that it was valued somewhere between $70 million to $100 million. It have raised multiple rounds of funding between 2012 and 2016. Despite raising multiple rounds of funding, it was not able to keep up the promise. At one time, it was targeting profitability and IPO. it went downhill. It started facing immense competition from Flipkart and Amazon, and it was not able to compete with them. It couldn't provide that product. It couldn't provide that user experience, and its losses kept increasing. Its revenue growth stagnant, and then finally it was sold for an all stock deal, which valued, and remember, it was sold for all stock deal. There was no cash exit. Founders did not get any single penny, and they will get their money, or they'll get cash only when they exit these shares. Probably the company who acquired ShopClues gets acquired by some other company for all cash deal, or that company gets listed, then only ShopClues founders will make money. So once it was so promising story, and today value is completely lost. So this shows that things are always not so rosy or not so shiny as they seem in the startup world. They have their own share of failure. They have their own share of difficulties. They have their own share of negative things. They have their own downside. One point I would like to highlight here is the main reason, I think, which would have been a main cause of failure for ShopClues, was lack of harmony between founders. They had a public spat. They were not able to coordinate between themselves. And if you remember, as I said, that execution is the most important thing, and people, again, is one part of it. So you have to make sure that whenever you are starting up, or whenever you are evaluating a startup from any perspective, you need to make sure how much harmony their founders have, how much closely their co-founders are working. So we have talked a lot about different companies, valuation, and a lot of other things. Now coming to the crux, or key thing for today's session, what are opportunities for professionals in the startup world? What's in it for me? Let's talk about different opportunities that startup worlds provide to us. Now, one way of providing services to startup is management consultancy. You can advise their management, because what you will notice that most of these founders, startup founders, come from diverse backgrounds, and there are very few founders who come from finance background, and finance is either to an ignored area in startup world. What they talk about is growth, growth, and growth, but they don't focus on controls. They don't focus on sustainable growth. So management consultancy is one area where there is a lot of opportunities for CAs. I'll talk about different examples and different details in coming slides. Another is fundraising support. Now, as I said, these may be mostly tech founders or non-finance background founders, but whenever you are raising funds, there is a lot of number crunching or a lot of strategic planning that is required. There are a lot of legal work that needs to be done. So we can provide that type of support to all these startups. Another area is traditional services area, which is accounting, tax, payroll, compliances, because they work on an asset light model. They also believe they shouldn't have much of employees. They don't want to hire a lot of employees to do routine work. They want to hire people who focuses only on growth, who don't focus on routine things, or like accounting, which have to be done every month, which have to be done every day, maybe tax returns that needs to be filed monthly, quarterly, payroll needs to be done monthly. So they want to keep their focus on business and not on these routine things. So we can help them in all these routine things, because for us it's bread and butter, but for them it it's a distraction. They lose focus from business if they focus on these things. So we can help them with this and add value to their business and add value to us also. And other is legal services. There are a lot of agreements, lot of legal things which keeps going on. I'll talk about details in following slides about legal services also. But point being, all these are broadly areas of services which we can help startup with. Definitely the list is much longer. There can be a lot of areas, or in fact we can start our own startup also. There is no stopping us, nothing is stopping us. But whenever we are talking about from a practice aspect, these are few things which we can focus on. Now going into the details, what type of management consultancy we can provide. One example here can be business structuring. When I say business structuring, what type of legal structure should they have? Will private limited company suit them? Will LLP suit them? Or till the time they reaches a certain scale, proprietorship function will work. So we can advise them in this. We can guide them. What is the right time to go from LLP to private limited, or from proprietorship to LLP, or from private limited to public limited, or maybe time for public limited to listing. We can help them guide, because we know all the nitty-gritties about all these things and what are pros and cons, and depending on their situation, we can help them weighing pros and cons, and help them deciding what business structure will suit them. Another example here is transaction structuring. When I say transaction structuring, at times you might need to have multiple entities, and whenever you are transacting between these different entities, there might be GST implications, there might be TDS implications, or there might be there might be working capital blockage also. So to optimize that, or to do all these transactions in an efficient manner, where they are compliant with all the regulations, where there is no TDS blockage, because once TDS is deducted, that money is with government, and unless you file a return and you get a refund, your money is blocked. And you have to make sure that there is no GST leakage in the system, or there is no GST credit which is accumulating unnecessarily, because from one angle that will be cash outflow, and what you get in return is GST credit, which unless you are profitable, you might not be able to use that. So we can help them structuring all these transactions, which can take care of all these aspects which I just talked about. Another aspect where we can help startups is strategic advisory, because they are only focused on growth. They tend to miss on basic things. For example, working capital optimization, or number of receivable days, your inventory days, your inventory SKUs, or when you should take next steps in your growth, what should be your next stages in growth, how should you try and position different products, right? So all these type of strategic advisory we can provide them, because they are focused one on the business growth only. They have very clear focus that they have to acquire more users, or maybe they have how they have to monetize user, how they have to create a perfect product for their users, but they kind of miss on all these things. One, two, it haven't been their area of interest, or they haven't had any experience in all these type of things. If they are from tech background, or if they are from any other background, they tend to overlook these things. But we, having a niche here or having an experience here, we can help them in strategic advisory. Another is mergers and acquisitions. The growth can be organic, but at times they need to acquire another company, or another company might need to acquire them. So what valuation will be, what is the best way to do it, what is the best time to do it, and taking care of nitty-gritties of mergers and acquisition is what we can do, and what we can add value to the startups. Another aspect where we can add value is fundraising. Fundraising is, as I said, is one of the most important aspects for today's startups. Uh, so fundraising have their different stages. And since we have a lot of clients who are angel investors, who are working in VC firms, who are in PE firms or VC firms themselves, or high net worth individuals or family offices who are managing wealth for them, since we have connect with all these, and these people are also looking for startups who are worth investing, and they are looking for certain diversification in their portfolio. So it's a win-win situation for them. So on one end, we can have startups who are looking for money. On other hand, we have our other clients like angel investors, HNIs, family offices, VCs, who wants to invest. If we do a matchmaking and if transaction goes through, we can charge a good success fee here. And generally, success fee is in the range of hovers around 5 to 6%. So if you are putting through a bigger transaction, we can make good money here for virtually doing minimal efforts. Another thing which we can help in fundraising, the critical aspect, or the most important aspect for all the discussions during fundraising is financial model or business plan of a startup. How their business model will pan out, how they will make money, how the growth looks like, what are the levers of growth. But since this being a complex financial document, it is very difficult for founders to prepare this. But since we have all these financial things at our hand, or we have all these things on our tips, we can help preparing them a financial model or business plan. Another aspect is pitch deck. Now, for those who don't know what a pitch deck is like a brochure wherein they summarize their value proposition, their idea, their execution strategy, and some summary of their financial model, which gives a broader sense to potential investor that what this startup is all about, what is the potential market, and how big it can go, and what are the pedigree of founder, what type of founders are there, what they have done so far. So all these details about startup in a nutshell, what is called pitch deck. And since we know how to project a business, how to position a business, we are best suited for preparing a pitch deck. So we can help founders preparing a pitch deck also. Another aspect is valuations. So there are different aspects of valuation. From business perspective, this valuation can be like 3x of revenue or 12x of EBITDA, or there can be any other metric for valuation. But we have to do DCF valuation under income tax and FEMA, and we can provide these valuation reports. So we can help them in business valuation, we can help them in regulatory valuations also, and we can help them with valuation reports. Another aspect is due diligence. For those who don't know what a due diligence is like an audit. But what happens in audit, we look at past, what have already been done, how my revenue have been, how my cost have been, what are my profits or what are my losses, right? So it's past looking, whereas due diligence is an audit, but it is forward looking in nature. Sure, it takes care of your past numbers, it takes care of your past growth, your profits, your cost, and everything. But it focuses on more commercial aspects, what your business can be, what are revenues you are projecting, and if you are saying that these are the levers which will help business growth 5x, what is the sanity of those levers? Is their potential market? Will users pay for it? All these aspects are taken care of in due diligence. Now, due diligence can be financial, it can be commercial, it can be legal. There are different aspects in due diligence that can be covered. So on one side, we can do due diligence on behalf of investors also. At times, there is something called VDD or vendor DD. wherein these startups appoints an advisor to do due diligence, and the report is directly submitted to the potential investors. So we can do due diligence also. On the flip side, there is something called due diligence support, wherein we don't do due diligence, someone else is doing due diligence, but we are providing support for due diligence, because whomsoever is doing DD, they'll be needing data, they'll be needing information, they'll be needing certain analysis, and there might not be a full-fledged team, or there might not be a team who is equipped to provide all this information or to see it in detail. We can be on the other side of the table, we can work on behalf of the company, or we can work closely with founders and help them go through the DD process completely. So due diligence support is another opportunity for us. Coming to the traditional aspects, accounting, taxation, payroll, compliances, we can provide them day-to-day accounting services. We can provide them monthly or weekly MIS preparation. We can help them in reconciliation, like bank reconciliation, or MIS to financial services reconciliation. We can help them in tax advisory. We can help them in tax compliances, like filing return or taking registrations, or where they need to take registration, what type of registrations they need to take. We can help them in payroll structuring and processing, because what happens in payroll, if you don't structure it carefully, burden of tax is higher on employees, and that way their take home gets reduced. If their take home gets reduced, to be competitive, these startup needs to offer higher salary, and then that becomes a higher wage bill for these startups. So payroll structuring, which is tax efficient, becomes of paramount importance. So this is one aspect. Another aspect where we can help them, and payroll processing, of course, if we are structuring it, if we have all the data, we know it, processing becomes a breeze. And we can help them with ROC compliances, FEMA compliances, RBA compliances, and all other relevant registrations wherever required. Another opportunity in startup is providing legal services. What happens in legal services here in the startup world specifically? There are definitive agreements called share subscription agreement, shareholder agreement, and share purchase agreement. Now, these are so massive documents running into hundreds of pages, and they have so much nitty-gritties and so much technical complications. It becomes very difficult to comprehend for people who are not aware of all these legal nitty-gritties. So we can help them drafting these. We can also help them vetting these. Now, there are key employee contracts. As I said, right, there is always key man risk in startup world. If your employee moves out, or if you don't get along with that employee, your startup's existence can be at risk. So you have to have a watertight contract with all these key employees where there is a risk. So we can help them getting a watertight key employee contract. We can help them with vendor contract. We can help them with customer contract. We can help them with ClickWrap contract. Now, for those who don't know what a ClickWrap contract is, now ClickWrap contract is, if you remember, whenever we are installing a software, or whenever we are signing up on an app or on website, we have an option, right, to click on I agree or I don't agree. So obviously most of us don't bother to read all that, but these type of agreements are called ClickWrap. So you click and the agreement is wrapped. So these type of agreements are called ClickWrap contract. So in normal circumstances, this might not sound important, but when you see from customer service perspective, or whenever a customer raises a complaint, all these legal relation or all these terms of services are captured in these contracts. So these needs to be very carefully drafted so that it covers all the possible aspects. So now we have talked about all the opportunities for us as a professional. How can we work in these startup? What are the areas where we can help these founders with? Now let's talk about one more aspect. I'll just quickly wrap that up and then I'll open it for Q&A. a lot of people keep asking me, how can they invest in startups? So I'll just touch base upon how to invest in startups, and then maybe I'll open and maybe if you want to invest, that will give you some insight on it, and then I'll open for Q&A. Now there are different routes for investing in startup. One is direct investing. If you know someone who has started up and you want to put money there, you want to provide capital to them, you have a firm belief in the idea and the founder, you can invest directly. Another option is pool with others. Here you don't have to put a large amount of money. You can pool with friends and families or a few other people. You can create a SPV, a special purpose vehicle, or maybe a LLP or a partnership firm. You put all that money, and that partnership firm or that LLP invest in the startup. Another option is use of platforms. There are different platforms today, like Agility Angels, IPV Venture, where you can go to these platforms, subscribe to their services. There are a lot of startups which comes to pitch on these platforms. You can listen to their pitches. You can go through the DD reports. You can go through the valuation reports. You can ask your questions to the founders. And if you like, you can invest. And minimum amount for investment on these platforms is 2 lakh rupees. So you can invest with as low as 2 lakh rupees in the startup. And if you have, say, higher amounts, for example, you want to invest 10 lakh rupees, rather than putting 10 lakh rupees in one startup, you would rather put that in 5 different startups, because you don't know what will go well and what won't. So just in case you want to create a portfolio. And another is alternative investment fund route. So what happens in alternative investment fund? This works more or less like a mutual fund, but this is a close-ended mutual fund. You don't need to have expertise. You just put this money in AIF, and there are fund managers or principals who are sitting in AIF, will evaluate the startups, and they will invest on your behalf in the startup. So you don't have to evaluate, go through the DD report. They'll take care of it. The downside of AIF route is minimum investment amount is 1 crore rupees, and you get your money locked in for 7 years. You don't have liquidity to get that money back. Now let's couple of points here for each of these options. In direct investing, the ticket size is very high. So you have to put because no startup founder would want a small ticket size like 1 lakh rupee, 2 lakh rupee, 3 lakh rupees, and he don't want a lot of investors on his cap table. And you need connections. You have to have people who are doing startups, and you have to have in-depth knowledge of that area. Otherwise, your decision might not be right. In pooling with others, you can again create portfolio, and you can get benefit of combined wisdom, because a lot of people or few people are investing together. You can discuss the idea and you can get perspective which you might have missed. In use of platform, you get multiple options, because there are a lot of startups which keep coming on these platforms and pitching them. You have a lot of options to invest, and you can pick and choose which you want to invest in. Definitely wisdom of crowd is always there, because a lot of people are evaluating all these startups at one point in time. You gain perspective, because whenever there is Q&A and Q&A is happening, you get to see different perspective. You get to see people from diverse backgrounds are asking questions. So wisdom of crowd plays a critical role in your decision making here. In AIF route, as I said, large amount is required, but you don't need any expertise. Now, standard disclaimer here, and I'll open for Q&A. Please put your questions in chat box.
Thank you, Mr. Nagpalji. There is one question from Caroli Somaya. She wants that what is the angel tax and when it charge and what rate?
I don't think I get the question. Can you please repeat it?
Angel tax. It is in chat box. What is the angel tax?
Angel tax. Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
When
So-
it is charged and what is the rate?
So there is no specific rate for angel tax. Angel tax is just part of the income tax. It is section 56 to 10 of the Income Tax Act. This says if there is some amount which you have received as a startup founder. Okay, let me take an example here for an easy explanation. For example, I am a founder of a startup, right? I say from a valuation report, my startup is valued at $10 million. Now, you as an investor putting money at $15 million valuation. Now, if I am
मेजर दो बताया है.
चलो इस पे लिखना है, जल्दी बोलो क्या पूछूं.
What are the roots?
can you mute other people?
Yeah.
There is some distraction. So if I have raised money at 15 million valuation, whereas as per valuation report, my valuation was 10 million. So this additional 5 million will be charged as my income from other sources. Now, if I have losses carry forward, then obviously I can offset it. But if I have profit, it will be added to my income and it will be charged as per slab rate.
Okay. Another question from Sherali Khoja. What are the exit route available for any investors in a startup?
So in startup, to exit is simply selling your securities. You can sell your securities if you have someone who is ready to buy, that is informal exit route, or if there is a strategic sale or there is a complete sale of that startup. Some other company is buying that startup and paying cash to all the shareholders, then it is an exit. Or if that company goes for an IPO, gets listed, and once that entity is listed, you can share your you can sell your shares on the exchange where that entity is listed. So one is you can do an offline exit. Two, whenever there is a strategic sale or an exit for the startup completely all cash, then you get an exit. And third, when there is an IPO, you get an exit.
Right. Mr. Radhesham Falodis ji is asking, what is the percentage of success ratio in the startup?
So I can answer this question anecdotally only. I don't have any concrete data around it, and I'm not sure whether there is any data available around this, because when you call a startup have started up, or when a startup have failed or succeed, the definition is not clear. So the demarcation is really difficult. But if I have to put a ballpark from my experience, what I have seen, only 1 in 1,000 startups succeeds, or even less.
So very less rate of the success.
Absolutely.
Another question from the Kushal Agrawal ji. List of the platform available online for startup funding.
So you can find it by a simple Google search, because I am not here to promote any platform, but most popular is IPV, Inflection Point Venture, and Agility Angel, where you can go and evaluate different startups. But make sure whenever you are doing a Google search, do your due diligence, because there are a lot of people who are claiming that they'll help you invest in startup, but actually they are just taking your money. So you have to be very careful that you are not falling prey to those type of people.
Any other question from members? I think you explained so well that
Okay, no worries. So if you want to reach me, these are my coordinates. Please feel free to reach me if you want anything in terms of understanding or any help in startup, any advice whenever if you are starting up your own startup or anything related to these.
I will share with all the members.
Okay.
Yeah. Good afternoon, all the participant members and speaker Jitendra Nagpal ji. Today day was full of knowledge and know about the startup case study opportunity for the professional and the practical aspects in the Indian context of from our learned speaker CA Jitendra Nagpal ji. I think everyone has an idea, but the journey from idea to execution is the startup journey. So idea, market, competition, product, business module, and execution, which Nagpal ji explained very well. Now I invite CA Aditya Maheshwari, our esteemed past convener, to give vote of thanks on behalf of Andheri Oshiwara Study Circle of WIRC to our speaker for sharing his experience, knowledge, and about the startup and the professional opportunity with everyone. Now I hand over to CA Aditya Maheshwari.
Yeah, first I thank the organizers for arranging this well-structured program for the benefit of all the members of the study circle. Also, very good work is being done at the study circle level, and for the benefit of the members and timely seminars are being kept. So the members are well aware of the latest happening in the practice area and not and the startup area and other areas also. Also, I thank the members for attending today and coming week on week on the virtual mode and attending and encouraging our core group members to keep more and more webinars so they can attend and gain knowledge. I also thank, lastly, I thank Jitendra Nagpal ji for today's session, and he had joined from his native place. So this shows his dedication and sharing his knowledge and explaining with example case studies and the progress and opportunities and professional opportunities in this and case studies and what could go wrong, what could be done, what we should achieve, and how if we want to even invest on a personal level, how can that be possible in a startup? So on behalf of Andheri Oshiwara Study Circle, I propose a very hearty vote of thanks. Thank you.
Thank you, Aditya ji, for vote of thanks to our learned speaker, Jitendra Nagpal ji. Thank you, Jitendra ji. Now, members, please note that the next virtual webinar will be held on 13th June 2021. Timing is the 10:30 to 12:30 on the topic New Code of Ethics 2020. Our speaker are CCM FCA Ranjit Kumar Agrawal from Kolkata and CCM FCA Shri Nivasji Joshi from Bombay. I request all the members to join in the large number for the success of the program. Thank you. Thank you very much.